it seems like there's some focus being placed on Peru right now, with elections having gone down on that end, and things not ending the way the business community or investors would have possibly liked it to.
I don't know what it is about that region, because, you know, nobody's paying any attention because they're all so fixated with the Eurozone area, blah, blah, blah. But, I mean, we know that Venezuela's got Hugo Chavez, who's way off the charts in terms of his economic policies. And then in both Colombia and Ecuador, there have been kind of leftist politicians actually elected. But we know those countries traditionally have had a big, like, underclass. And so from an election point of view, it's always been a bit borderline. But this result now from Peru is not positive if you're involved with, you know, sort of global mining, or if you have interests or investments there. So in particular negative, because a lot of the copper mines that are expected to come online in the next decade or so are in fact in Peru. So let's take a look at some of the companies that this may well affect down the line. Yeah, I'm trying to think of them, you know, because at the top of my head I know that there are some that have direct, I know Goldfields has got gold mines there, and I know also that Anglo has got some copper mines in development there. But this didn't really seem to be dawning on them yet, but the Peruvian Stock Exchange was suspended because the shares were falling too much. The guy, as part of his policy projection, says he's going to raise taxes significantly on existing mines. You know, it's that whole thing about national sovereignty, blah, blah, blah. One is reminded of that old line about the only thing that's being, you know, worse than being exploited by the capitalists is not being exploited by the capitalists. But I wouldn't be too encouraged by these developments. And it brings me to one of my favorite theories. You know, people constantly see developments in global politics. You see all sorts of nonsense about personal disasters affecting American senators and so on. None of that stuff has any impact. What counts in the long run is the stability of an economic context and whether or not people are happy to pay taxes, and the legitimacy of the political system. So, you know, things like this are not good. What happened in the Ivory Coast is not good. These are things that can affect long-term stock valuations. Of course, and it draws attention once more to the kind of debate that's raging locally, where we've had gold miners, for example, looking outside of South Africa's borders for more lucrative opportunities and directing investment elsewhere. Yeah, although to be fair to ourselves, you know, we often obsess about our politics because we live here, and we worry about what, you know, foreign investors will think of policy A, B or C. I mean, in the main, so long as you kind of respect institutional sovereignty, and like this decision we saw with Walmart, Massmart, the competition authorities decision was made, due process is followed, that's fine. People, I don't think, expect things to be, you know, neoliberal around the world. They don't expect to have everybody giving everything away on a plate, but they just need to see some sort of institutional stability. So I think we're still counted in the favorable part of the world where things are going well. It's where you get situations like Egypt, you know, then things start coming loose. And that's interesting to highlight, because there was a lot of debate in terms of what that whole wrangling process with regards to the Walmart Massmart deal had done to foreign investor sentiment and FDI flows into the country. Yeah, and we've seen these things before. You'll remember that when Vodacom was kind of in discussion with Vodafone, things also kind of took a bit of a wobble at the 11th hour. I mean, regulatory processes can be problematic. But I think as far as South Africa goes, you know, we seem to always manage to squeak through in the end. And that's why I sometimes wonder how policy gets made in this country, but at least, you know, institutionally things keep moving along. So I think, yeah, we're still good. Okay, well, time for dart throwing exercises. Dart throwing, the highlight of the day. The highlight of the day. Throw accurately, you should say. Oh, look at that. Datatec. We haven't talked about that one for a while. I mean, the IT sector in our country always comes in for some conversation, because people worry that there are all these global companies with such great intellectual property, and locally they just seem to be box droppers, and you know, there's not that much intellectual property. But to be fair, of course, Dimension Data is off the boards. Datatec has got quite a nice global footprint. That Westcon business of theirs is quite big. So it hasn't been a great performer in recent years, but generally I'm quite positive about it. Seems to be picking up a bit of steam, gathering a bit more attention. But it's certainly become, I think, the sort of blue chip in the sector compared with some of the smaller peers down there. Of course, when you're looking at those smaller peers, though, and we had this discussion last week when UCS Group was planning or announced plans to delist off the JSE, and how investors actually value these stocks. That is a big problem at this stage. And he made the point that their competitors are global corporations that have these kind of huge reputations in international markets, and when they look at their kind of listed entity and their profitability and their price to earnings ratio, everybody's like saying, well, this doesn't compare favorably, so they'd rather be private. Yeah, I think that is an interesting observation.
The viability of them being listed on the local bourse.
Exactly. In other words, in some instances, you would have sectors that are just not significantly developed enough in our market to command the same kind of respect that they do globally. I mean, another case in point is healthcare. Globally, healthcare is an enormous sector of the global economy. And yet, when you come to South Africa, you've got Aspen, which is a fairly big player, Adcock Ingram, and then you've got the hospital groups, and that's basically it. Tech is another area which is problematic. I mean, there are, of course, areas in our market which are overrepresented, like the mining shares and so on and so forth, where we're spoiled for choices. And you often see that in people's portfolios. They woefully overweight certain stuff just because it's there.